To begin with, what is racial literacy? Racial literacy is a concept developed by Black Native American sociologist Frances Widens Twine. And she describes it in her research done in the United Kingdom with mixed race families as a form of racial socialization and anti-racist training that parents of African descent practiced in their efforts to defend their children against racism. And this refers to a set of cultural strategies and practices designed by parents to teach their children, predominantly of African and Caribbean heritage, how to recognise, respond to, and counter forms of everyday racism. So within education, this translates as having the understanding and practice to recognise, respond to, and counter forms of everyday racism or racial microaggression at all levels: personal, cultural, and institutional. In terms of what these things are, everyday and overt racism, we're talking about verbal or physical abuse, deliberately making fun of accents, language, skin colour, clothing, that which ostensibly is recognised as hate crime. And microaggressions are the everyday verbal, non-verbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons solely based upon their marginalised group membership. Examples of that would be making fun of food that people eat, making fun of names, touching headwear, hair, and making a particular culture or heritage out to be less than it is. And finally, the institutional or systemic, and this is where education comes in, is discrimination or unequal treatment on the basis of membership of a particular ethnic group, typically one that is a marginalised or minority group. And it arises from systems, structures, or expectations that have become established within society or an institution. So why is anti-racism needed in 21st century Scotland, and what is it essential to know? As part of the programme, it was important to first understand race and racism in order to support any anti-racist practice. This was accomplished through a series of webinars and presentations by guest speakers. So these 6 points, these 5 points that are on the slide here, it's important to recognise now that racism is a contemporary rather than a historical issue. Racial identity is a social construct, not a biological one. It's important to realise the impact of whiteness. It's important for us to know how to develop language to discuss race and racism. And it's important to know how racial microaggressions operate in everyday school settings. This is because race and racism intersect with other areas of discrimination, such as class, gender, and sexuality, with a descriptor known as intersectionality. So the concept of a racial group comes from certain anthropological theories which have long been disproved. They were mostly developed in the late 19th and early 20th century in Western Europe, and claimed that humans could be divided into racial groups based on physical and behavioural traits linked to ethnicity, linked to nationality, and related concepts like shared language. These theories were influenced by colonialism and imperialism, and there's the desire to show that non-white groups were inferior in order to justify the actions of Western nations. For hundreds of years, white British society has enjoyed a position of economic, social, and political power over non-white people in Britain and across the world through empire and colonialism and their after effects known as coloniality. Although people in Scotland often know little about this history, the social attitudes that developed over this time are still present in our society. This is known as white ideology or sometimes white supremacy. The advantages that this still brings to white majority ethnic Scottish people are known as white privilege. And the important thing to know about racism is that it is defined and based on outcomes, not individual intentions.